Stories of life told by photographers.
I was listening to the radio on the way over. To make my photo walk today, I've come to a path a fair way from my house, so it's still in Berkshire land. But I was listening to the radio, and it's National Near Miss Day today. What the frankly is that, Neil? Yes, I had to look it up, I'll tell you. This day, 1989, a mountain-sized asteroid came within 500,000 miles of colliding with the Earth, which on the cosmic scale of things apparently is a close call. I would imagine, yes, in the grand scale of things, when you think of the size of the universe, which frankly gives me a nosebleed, it's probably what would you describe it as? 500,000 miles, 500,000 miles is a bit like a universal cigarette paper's width, I suppose. Geophysicists said that had it hit, life on Earth would have radically changed, possibly in a dinosaur not walking the Earth way. We wouldn't have found the delights of TikTok for a start. And on that note, I saw a very interesting programme. I'm digressing before we even start today, and I've got so much to tell you. This programme estimated that had that asteroid not hit, the original one, the dino one, that is, they might still be here, possibly with us. That we'd be sharing an existence. Can you imagine the grocery store? Velociraptor clearing out frozen food, aisle 7, eating the odd passerby who's just popped out to get a ready meal, unexpectedly eaten by a velociraptor. But the most incredible thing about this near miss that was in 1989, nobody apparently saw it, even though it was only something like 2 moon distances away. Scientists only noticed it 9 days after it completely whipped past us. Dr. Bob, did you see that, Dr. Bob? What are you talking about? Did you see it on the screen over there? No? No, that there. Oh, I can't see anything. No, that big smudge there. Can you see? Oh, that. Oh, I thought you'd touched the screen after eating pizza again. Oh. Anyway, I'm going to make my first picture today, my sketchbook image. It's been very rainy. We're promised gales in a moment. You know what it's like when I'm trying to make this podcast outside with you on a photo walk and it's blowing a hoolie. It becomes really difficult. Let's put your letters down. Hold on, put them there. I'm going to make a picture of the sky, so I am. With the asteroid in mind, the skies in mind, and in the way dear Steve Shipman, the late photographer Steve, mentored me and us, when you start your story each day, sometimes look up. See what sort of sky it is, because that's a great way to start the day's story. Oh, look at that cloud. That's proper moody. Right, I'm going to put a bit of a tree in as well as I look up through the tree. Oh, look at the shapes. Ooh, that's either going to be, it's coming our way. I think we're going to get very wet. I'll be looking at this, though, carefully when I get home. See if I can see a dot, which, knowing me, will probably be a dust spot on the sensor. Or I'll clone it out, thinking it's a dust spot on the sensor, not realising I've just seen something NASA have missed again.
The Photo Walk is brought to you by mpb.com. Quality used photo and video kit. Buy, sell, trade, create at mpb.com.
While we're talking about the sky above us, which we were, I'll link to some original mpb.com content today. A wonderful interview on the MPB site with astrophotographer Nicholas Rommelt, who, let's face it, is probably likely to notice something more than I. We haven't actually done astrophotography on the show. I suppose I'm waiting. I mean, we've taken the show abroad here and there, haven't we? I could well be, I suppose in my subconsciousness, I could well be waiting for a trip to, I don't know, Iceland, Greenland, something like that, which will, with the Northern Lights, be just the programme to do that. Right, my first few words to you today in my little monologue-y thing as we walk at the start of the show is going to be an invite. An invite to watch the most beautiful film It's such a gentle story, although it does have a fabulous twist. It's called Where the Crawdads Sing. For me, it is storytelling at its finest. Last night, I burned the candle until 1:43 a.m. Very precise, Neil. Well, you know me. I like to let you know what I'm doing, to watch the end of this beautiful film. I'm usually falling across my desk by 12:01. But in cinematic terms, it's wondrously shot. And actually, it's quite melodious. Can a film be melodious? I think this is. And it has that thing I love in films, a running voice narrative. My favourite, are you going to say Shawshank Redemption with Morgan Freeman, Neil, by any chance? Oh, how did you know? It's almost like you're reading my mind. Yes, that's my favourite, probably, of all time in the genre or subgenre of voice of God narrative in the background of a film. Morgan is great in that, isn't he? I've said this before, I'll say it again, I could listen to him read the telephone directory. I really could. Cassandra Campbell does the most fantastic job in this film. And I'd go as far to say that this film with Cassandra at the helm is well, as a voice, is like a meditative experience. Anyway, there's my tip. Where the Crawdads Sing. Fabulous movie. Which sort of, might be slightly tenuous, but I'm hoping not so much. Sort of plays into my guest today. It probably sounds like I'm doing a classic bit of shoehorning. Not you, surely not, Neil. No, not me. Today we're talking about storytelling. And my guest, Julia Boggio, is going to talk about storytelling. My guests actually over the next fortnight, including today, will both extol the virtues of writing. Julia this week, a very respected social photographer who turned left at the creative fork in the roads the year prior to the madness of 2020 breaking out, possibly 2 years actually, and became an author. And next week, an American photographer called Josh Rose, who, he hasn't placed down his camera. He makes the most extraordinary dance pictures. And he works on films that celebrate our humanity. So much to talk about. Anyway, Josh is next week's guest, but we'll talk about writing with him as well. But this week, as I say, it's Julia Boggio. Now, I've known Julia's work in the UK for a long time, and I didn't share this with her, and I wish I had actually. And although her Star Wars is very different to what I believe mine to be, she's a photographer who greatly inspired me as I began my professional photographic journey in the early noughties. But she had a light bulb moment at a photographic conference, and if there really is a book in every single one of us, she has a story today that deals with, rejection, publishing, the submission process, marketing, and an elephant in a room. Not literal, obviously, which we'll discuss later on. Julia Boggio, a storyteller with a camera, who's become a storyteller with a typewriter.
Today on the Photowalk.
I think in a way, writing this book about photographers, it was that gateway for me from moving from one area of my life into another, because I love photography and I will always love photography and it will always be in my heart. But I think that as a business, after 15 years, I just got tired of the hustle and it was time for something else.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today we're joined as you and I walk by Julia Boggio in a show that's written by you from the letters, the thoughts and the pictures that you've shared with us. Everybody is a photographer on this walk, whatever camera you use, and that includes the humble smartphone, because this is a show about how taking and making photos has you feel, what it does for us, what it does for others around us, and we'll be inspired as we walk by words from other picture makers and adventurers with a camera. In the mailbag today, we're off to a modern-day henge called a denge for a concrete photo opportunity. A letter about the grand catharsis that making pictures brings, which will be a sort of sub-theme, I think, for the next few weeks. And the start of a story of what happens when you lose the computer, the only computer you've kept every picture of a loved one on. Weddings, the responsibility, the stress, the pain in the SD card slot when someone in your family says, listen, you've got a camera, could you just shoot my wedding, please? We'll repeat the month's assignment because you have just one more week to take part in this one now, and I'd like you to help me search for ghosts. I will tell you what I mean by that later on. Nearly 7 billion people on this planet are able to make a photograph with something and record life. So we're not walking alone, documenting our place and time in this world. So, checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's. Check. Walking boots on. Check. Astro map and sensor cleaner, just in case. Check. Let's walk. For my sketchbook images of late on the show, those pictures that accompany my walk, I suppose I've started to try and get some sort of theme rolling. Not necessarily the theme that bears relevance to the subject matter of the show or guests on the show, but just something that I can that sort of runs with a theme as I walk out. It's almost like a challenge. Not really a challenge, but I suppose a sub-project of the walk. And today I think it's going to be skies. Since we started talking about skies, I mean, look at this. There's a break in the clouds here, and we have the blue of what possibly might be coming our way, right next to these savage, dark clouds. Another one, hold on, 200th f3.6. I've got the neutral density filter on, and there we go, a few there. Neil, that doesn't sound like you were taking a lot of care there. I was, honestly. They're sketchbookers, remember? Oh, hang on. Almost came a cropper in the puddle there. Right, where do we start with letters? Giles of Penfoundshire. This week, actually, there's quite a few UK-based letters, missives, and Julia, of course, is based in the UK. Although she's an American, there's a slight lilt you might recognise when we hear from her in a while. 2 parts today to the conversation. But last week we were on our proper travels around the globe, weren't we? This week a bit closer to home. Giles of Penfoundshire was telling me something quite worrying this week, my friend Giles. When I say worrying, it wasn't the stuff of sleepless nights. I reserve that for the evening before a root canal. But he's got friends coming over from Australia land that are staying with him for a couple of days before they make their way over to France to start their tour de Europe. On that note, I got a letter from... That's nice. Very pretty. Where are you? When I look up, they fly off. Have you gone? I got a letter from France, from Valerie Jardin, who, straight after our chat on the show last week, flew off to France from America for some photography and family time. And I was very impressed, actually. She was on a Delta flight, exchanging messages with me whilst eating breakfast in the air. I thought, that sounds very posh. That's turning left, certainly, isn't it, as you get on board? Or maybe seasoned travellers will say, what, Neil, that's par for the course these days. What are you flying on? Essentially, I'm your typical Riot Air client. Where the air safety card is the only luxury reading item. So no, I have never experienced being able to eat breakfast and write text to Valerie Jardin, or anybody else for that matter. Anyway, Giles, do not share this with your friends, but Valerie said just after she touched down in Paris, and I quote, "Trash hasn't been collected in weeks and strike to last for at least another week. Yikes. Sacre bleu, Rodders. Plume de ma tante." And this is one of my favourite countries in the whole widest world, as you know. We seem to have, there's a sort of worldwide strike thing going on at the moment, isn't there? It's not just in this country. I mentioned it last week. We're sort of a diary of strikes. Can we go out today? Who's striking today that's going to stop us doing what we're doing? I know we're supporting the workers, but it seems it's not just in our backyard. After the last I'm digressing again now. After the last pandemic 100 years ago, we had the Roaring Twenties, didn't we? I think everybody thought the Roaring Twenties was on the way. Now it seems 100 years on, we have the Rotting Twenties. Anyway, Toi de retour de la chambre. Let's move on. Sir Giles of Penfoundshire, and this does have a little glancing reference to the first letter, which I will get to in a moment. He told me that he was taking his friends over, before they go to France, to Stonehenge. We were supposed to be going for a curry, Giles, Friday, weren't we? I've been dumped. He couldn't remember his friends were coming over from Australia. So they might have had a surprise. Where are you? I'm in the curry house with my friend Nick. Oh, was I supposed to meet you at the airport? If anybody else is free for a curry tonight, I'm dateless. We'll go shoot the breeze over a korma and Danzak. Sorry, I am digressing here. Or it might be in digression for me after a Danzak. Anyway, Giles is taking his Australian visiting friends to the Henge, which is a place we've photo walked in before, haven't we? And we've been to the nearby Avebury Stones. That was only a month or so ago. But he told me that there's been an element of reconstruction going on at Stonehenge. And it appears that I've been really naive. I thought this marvel of history had never, ever been touched. So off I trotted to look it up. Not that I doubted you, Giles, but I thought, no, surely not. Most of and this is what I found, a quote from a British doctoral account. Most of the 1 million visitors who visit Stonehenge and Salisbury Plain every year believe they're looking at untouched 4,000-year-old remains. But virtually every stone has been re-erected, straightened, or embedded in concrete between 1901 and 1964. I mean, as a real estate agent might say, it's a bit airy and still no roof. He says, sounding like a complete Philistine. Anyway, Giles, having found that out, it was still a fabulous place to go and visit. You might want to take them a little further east to a sort of modern-day henge in Kent. And this is where we start with our first letter. Neil, I thought you'd never get there. I know. Well, you know me. It's a gentle walk in the countryside. That's what the Photowalk show's all about. Our friend Paul of Hudson, one of our extra milers, has sent in some fabulous pictures from a denge. Not a henge, but a denge. The Denge sound mirrors, which I'd never heard of before. Now I have. So if you're visiting the UK, you now have a denge and a henge. I recently, says Paul, went to the denge with my wife and sister and was amazed by the structures and their ability to transmit sounds such as whispers over 50 yards or more. Between the lonely expanse of Romney Marsh and the long stretch of shingle beach at Greatstone-on-Sea lies a small man-made island, and it contains these 3 mysterious concrete structures. Curved and facing upwards toward the eastern sky, they patiently wait for the first faint sounds of approaching enemy aircraft, ready to gather and focus them down to the man sitting below, listening on a stethoscope. Built between 1927 and 1934, the Denge sound mirrors were already obsolete by 1939, a dead-end technology replaced by radar. As if, though, refusing to give up the job they were designed for, they still stand all these decades and decades and decades, granted not 4,000 years, and decades later. Decaying, slightly, but defiant, curiously amplifying strange sounds if you pass them by. Think of them as huge cups you can hold to your ear to hear stuff in the distance. And I have some pictures of them that Paul has sent in that I'm going to share on the show page. You made fantastic. I'm not quite sure what they're not landscape pictures. They kind of are. I think of them as, well, portraits of these incredible, weird and fantastical structures, Paul. And you did something really important as well. You recorded the scale of them. They are huge. So one of them is literally like a big ear that pokes up into the air. And I can imagine a chap sitting there underneath, or a chapess underneath, on a stool with a stethoscope somehow plugged into this concrete structure, listening out for things that might be flying across the channel. Extraordinary. But you recorded scale by putting people in the pictures. In one of them, there's a kind of it's kind of like a Where's Wally picture. I'll let you decipher which one that is, which is really important, scale in pictures, when you make your photographs. scale can be such an important part of it. Sometimes I've seen little Lego figures used for macro photography, which is a very effective way of doing it. I think Stonehenge actually surprises going back to the henge, surprises quite a lot of folk who've seen pictures of the henge, because they don't realise that whilst it's impressive, it's not necessarily as large as some people believe. And they've seen it sans people, probably. Anyway, henge or denge, fabulous pictures, Paul. And you've made me want to go and visit a place I'd never heard of before for a photo walk. I'll take me wellies, because I think I have to cross a little water, don't I? All this talk, though, about henges is a perfect segue to a guest from a few months back, Arthur Meyerson, who I was delighted to talk with Arthur. It really was. The colour genius. Episode 366, Arthur made his name photographing some of the world's most iconic brands for adverts adverts I personally grew up with. But here he is in a slightly longer clip from his appearance, but it's well worth a revisit considering the context of when he visited Stonehenge to make his once-in-a-lifetime photograph.
It's really a funny story. I had been in Europe. It was one of my first big shoots overseas. I'd been in Europe for about a month and a half, 2 months. My wife I invited to come along because it was early on, and she, quote-unquote, was my assistant. We took one. I said, okay, it's our last day. Got to go to Stonehenge. I want to go there. I want to make the photo that, that Paul Caponegro never made. I want to make the photo that Pete Turner never made. I had all these grand ideas that I'm going to make this great photo. And so the first thing was me driving in London, and then the outskirts. That in itself would have been a movie. But I got in so many roundabouts and couldn't get out. I was going in circles for. Finally, I just got spit out on the road.
We do like our roundabouts here.
You do, and listen, I've started to see them over here now. They make sense. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
But to the uninitiated rookie driving on the right side, that was a total. That was a total cluster. I won't use the word, but it was anyway. We finally got there, and the entire time we were arguing over directions, but we got there. And as we got there, the sky clouded up and it started to rain. And I thought, oh no, this isn't good. And I said, we got to wait. And we waited, and it stopped raining, but it was still cloudy. And you know how you go through the kind of underground parkway there, and you come out, and there you are.
That's right.
And there it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. Yeah. It's so little. I thought it was so much bigger. I know. There it is. And at that time, as I remember, Neil, it was taped off. You could only get as far as where I was standing when I made this photograph. And I thought, well, it's cloudy, it's overcast, I'll at least record it. And I began taking pictures, not paying attention to anything. And there was tourists on either side of me. And all of a sudden, I hear this humming noise, and out of the right corner of my eye is the gentleman the groundskeeper mowing the lawn. Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh God, I've waited. This is going to be it. A guy cutting the grass. No, I can't do this. And as he's coming into the frame, and I'm still looking, I'm going, wait a minute, this is kind of funny. And I make the picture. And I make it again as he passes back the other way. And I think one more time. Now, all the while, I can hear the people over my shoulder going, he doesn't know it, but that fellow's in all of his photos. And I'm going, yes, I knew it. But in any case, the picture was used in a self-promotional ad when I got back. I really loved it. I saw the humor and I thought it was funny. And no, it wasn't what I had in mind. But again, I said going out with preconceptions is a better way to do it. And a greeting card company called me and wanted to use the picture. And they said, we'd like to use the picture. And I thought, well, I don't have a model release on this guy, but I'm thinking, he'll never see it. He's in England. This is here. And I agreed to it. And I got they don't pay a lot for that. So I took the money and ran. About a year later, the mail comes to the studio, and I see this envelope, beautiful stationery, Stonehenge monument, da-da-da-da. I'm thinking, God, what is this? Did I win a prize? And I open it up, and it's a very formal letter. And it's, "Dear Mr. Meyerson, I am so-and-so. I am the heads," he had some great title, but the groundskeeper of Stonehenge. "Recently, my brother who lives in Connecticut, USA, saw a postcard," and I'm going, "Oh my God, I'm going down." And and his last thing was, "Is there any way that I could possibly get a print of the photograph?" And I thought, "Buddy, you're getting the best friend I could make."
That's Arthur Meyerson. And I'll link to the episode where I spoke with him, of course, on the show page today. For all the links that you hear today, links to Julia's work and the book and any guests that you will hear, the pictures that we talk about within the programme that you've kindly sent in to be used, such as Paul's pictures of the Denge a moment ago, go to the show page on photowalk.show today. There'll be a link for it in your podcast player app. You found it, I'm sure, just there. That's the one. That one. Don't click it yet. Wait, I'm not quite sure what it will do. Click it later. So there will be links that you can follow. The show page is populated now by pictures, of course, text, links, lots of links, and films. We have a film gallery as well each week. If you'd like to send your pictures in, though, I'd love to hear from you. Any stories that you have, places that you've been, I'm going to set you a small challenge later on as well in that respect. Then please send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide. If you'd be so bold to do a bit of resizing for me, bit of image optimization, that would be very kind. If you don't worry, I will do the heavy lifting for you. Here is a letter from Michael Mixon ahead of my guest, our first visit on this show to Julia shortly. Here's Michael Mixon, who is responsible actually for next week's guest, whom I will talk about at the end of the show today. And this letter is appropriate, apposite, because it's nuptially charged, a subject which features very heavily in what I'm about to talk about with Julia shortly. Do you remember we were talking about photographing events for family that you might not feel necessarily comfortable with? Those moments where somebody says, "Oi, you got that camera?" As I said before, you got a camera, nice fancy camera. Can you come and do? All right, okay. Off you toddle with all the stresses when you were really hoping a professional might have been there. Anyway, this is a letter that's titled 4 Weddings and Nothing. Hi Neil, says Michael. In episode 372, you asked whether any of us had shot weddings for family and friends and what our experiences were. I suspect that at this point, anybody with even a passing interest in photography has been asked to shoot a wedding. And so naturally, I have as well, says Michael. So my dabbling in weddings took place many moons ago when I was first getting into photography. I was naturally flattered that people might ask me to shoot their wedding, but I also know that another part of their decision was that I'd probably do it on the cheap, or in the case of my sister's wedding, for free. I'm sure not, Michael. I'm sure they asked you because they'd seen your pictures and thought, that's the photographer for me, he says, trying to make you feel better about that. And Michael, you're not alone, by the way. I've been asked to shoot a few free things for family too. I shot my brother-in-law's wedding, must be about 10 years ago now, for free, obvs. And actually, it was a gig that cost me best part of, 11,000 lira or something. It was a new suit, two mini suits for my boys as they were page boys. Sam had a new outfit and, there was a wedding album at cost, granted, but they're still not cheap. Hotel room and the Rolls Royce of earplugs that were so good when it came to loud music that even our 5-year-old at the time fell asleep in front of the bass bin speakers belonging to the band. Terrible parenting, I'm sorry, yes. Anyway, as Michael says, as a beginner photographer, doing it for little to no money seemed fair given that I'd absolutely no idea whether I'd produce anything they would like. And seeing that I would be eating overpriced wedding food for free as part of the gig, the idea of charging them anything for my amateurish skills felt like some form of robbery. And what I learned pretty quickly was that I didn't like shooting them. Oh, Michael, this is not going to be the happy ending I want, is it? While it wasn't all that bad, I mean, I'm pleased with some of the photos, and I did have some nice exchanges with people during the event. The stress of the gig was not something I ever adjusted to. Granted, I only did 4 weddings, which is arguably nowhere near enough time to develop the necessary confidence or the wisdom to embrace the inevitable anxiety. But I remember thinking that I got into photography for the joy of it. And so why would I want to continually put myself in positions where that joy could be trampled by stress and fear? I tell you what, Michael, there are many photographers, certainly in the wedding sphere, and I would imagine other genres as well. Did you hear that rumble? Tell me we've not got thunder as well. This will be everything. I'll have to move out of this forest bit for a start. Yeah, Michael, there are many photographers that love shooting but do get really, really nervous before events, gigs, commissions, and so on. Anyway, says Michael, I'm attaching some of my favourites. I haven't looked at these in years, so it was actually kind of nice to peruse these memories, which I guess is a lesson in itself. Looking at them now just brings back the sweet, melancholic happiness of nostalgia, which is much stronger than any whiff of memory I may have about how stressed I felt while taking them. Best regards from Mike. Well, Mike, that's a kind of a happy ending, isn't it? So thank you for your letter and for your thoughts. And I shall share some pictures on the show page today. I think you did a sterling job, personally. I mean, I know I'm looking at a few images from the wedding, but if these are anything to go by, you should be pleased. And I mean that. So yeah, they'll be on the show page today, and thank you for that. Is it a sanitary tale? No, Neil, that's not the right word. I'll leave it in, just in case. So to my guest, Julia Boggio. She owned a top luxury London portrait studio based in Wimbledon and became, well, in the UK at least, although I think she spoke in America too, I'm pretty sure about this. She became a mentor to many photographers and a very good conference speaker as well. But her story was about to change, and we often talk about writing on this show and the power of the written and spoken word alongside making our pictures. And that's what's really drawn me to want to spend some time with Julia on the show today. And I do like the occasional curveball and meeting photographers who've embraced other creative senses. And we talk a lot about writing. I think it's a really important part of the creative, not just the creative process, but as you'll hear much more about next week, the cathartic, and we're going to talk about catharsism soon, the cathartic process of being creative. So here's Julia Boggio, who's inspired me to think about my 500 words a day, which will all become clear later on. Part 1 of 2 parts today. Here's Julia. Julia, I am sorry if I'm going to ask you a question that, if I could see you now, you would raise your eyebrows to. But in radio, as in podcasts, as in any form of interview, some stories are evergreen and will always be because of their viral nature. And for you, you won't know this, but I've been waiting for many years to ask you this question. I wonder if you can guess the question.
I'm scared.
You might not like it when I ask you. You might go, oh, Neil, of all the questions, that's your question?
You're building it up. So now I'm curious, if anything.
Not a good idea, is it? Did you ever expect your wedding dance would go viral to 10 million viewers on YouTube?
Oh, no. I mean, no one expects that, do you? I mean, because we actually got married in 2005.
Right.
And then we had this video of our wedding dance, and YouTube wasn't even really a thing at the time. No. So then roll on 2007, and we're like, oh, let's put it up to show some friends in America, and then it just went from there.
10 million, and still climbing, apparently.
Yeah, it's still going. People still love a bit of dirty dancing.
They do. Right, let's get to the main thrust of why we're talking. As a photographer, I know you're no longer a practicing photographer as such, but it's in your blood.
Exactly.
I think we're constantly reinventing ourselves, and when I say we, I mean there's a great generalization, but I do think it's it's a creative character trait for many, I think, either in terms of style or genre, medium, the way we communicate, online, offline language, whatever. We are to some degree or another quite Phoenix-like. And this is a great way to introduce your first book. I know you're an established photographer and a mentor of past, but you'll now quote, and I don't know how you feel about this, an emerging talent.
I feel very good about that.
Is that exciting, emerging again, or is it a bit frightening, or all of the above?
I think, it is. It's both. You're completely correct. I'm really excited about this new life as an author that I seem to be living. It's something I've wanted to do since I was a little girl. So, it's very exciting. But as you said, it's also scary because I'm in uncharted territory here, feeling my way and hoping for the best, prepared for the worst.
But I wonder whether the photography, being a creative, has helped you. This might seem weird because they are two different senses, but in terms of your writing, has that been a help?
Well, I've always had a theory that creative people are creative people. It's gonna come out in everything that you do. I mean, I started out as an advertising copywriter, and then I went into photography. And even when I was doing photography, I used to teach a lot about marketing, and I would say to photographers, your marketing should be just as creative as your photography. And that's something I believe. I believe that our creativity, if you're a creative person, it pours out through everything that you do.
Yeah, it's a great sweeping generalization, but I'm not sure that photographers write enough anyway.
No, why not? I've always said two of the greatest skills you can have really are writing and photography, because then you can pretty much live anywhere in the world.
That's true. So it sounds like writing did figure in the spreadsheet of plans. But what about fiction? I've definitely wanted to write stories, but I like to talk about Neil Gaiman whenever people talk about this, because he wrote an amazing book called The Graveyard Book. And he actually had the idea for that book 23 years before he wrote it. But he waited. He didn't think he was a good enough writer at the time when he had the idea. So he put it on the back burner and he waited till he had the skills to give it the due that it deserved. And so when he finally wrote it, it ended up winning all the awards. It's one of my favorite books. And I kind of feel the same way. I feel like when I was younger, I didn't have the experience to be the kind of author that I wanted to be, and to write the kind of stories I wanted to write. But let me tell you, being a professional photographer for 15 years, that gave me the experience. Yeah. Well, in particular, the subject matter, I know, and we're going to come to that. But in this, everyone has a book in them, kind of. I don't know whether that's a cliche or not, whether it's a truism or not. But I think there's a great reticence, isn't there? Because people feel, well, I can't. Well, you mentioned Neil Gaiman, so let's mention him again. Well, I can't write like Neil Gaiman. I don't have a brain of a Neil Gaiman. I don't use long enough words. I mean, there's many reasons you can put in your way for not writing, aren't there?
There are loads, but at the end of the day, if we do all have a book in us, then just sit down and start writing it. I mean, the stats are that only 3% of people who start writing a book finish it.
Oh.
So, yeah. So I feel like I'm in quite a distinctive clan there. You never know unless you try.
Yeah. The SWPP, we should probably explain what that is, because to an audience outside the UK, you won't necessarily be aware of what that is. But a conference kind of started this book. And it was the launch pad 2, really, wasn't it, for your first book signing at any rate? So let's explain what the SWPP is first.
Okay, so the SWPP, I've been going to that conference. It's a photography conference since it was in Coventry. I mean, that's a long time. I
never knew it was in Coventry.
It was. I went to it. I think it was the last year that it was in Coventry, and then it moved to London. Okay. And so this was like the early thousands, the early noughties. So, so it's a great conference, loads of international speakers, a fantastic print competition, and a trade show. So when was it? I think it was 2018 or 2019. I went and I was having coffee with Sarah Edmonds. And I said to her, I was thinking about a change of pace, about writing romance novels about photographers. And she said, "Oh, you want to be the Jilly Cooper of photography."
Yeah.
And in that moment, like, the title of the book, the plot, the characters jumped into my head. So I owe Sarah a great debt of gratitude. And yeah, jumped into my head and I was off.
But you said you'd been wanting to write for many, many years. So it sounds like you were just waiting for the vehicle.
I was, yeah. I think I was waiting for the right story.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, writing this book about photographers, it was that gateway for me from moving from one area of my life into another, because I love photography and I will always love photography and it will always be in my heart. But I think that as a business, after 15 years, I just got tired of the hustle and it was time for something else.
Well, you've certainly beaten me, Julia, because for years I've been thinking there must be it shouldn't happen to a wedding photographer book. I fear that's a little bit too similar to something else. You mentioned Neil Gaiman. He attributes his success to always revealing a little of himself, or a lot of himself, actually, in the books he writes. And he isn't the only author to have said that, of course. But in this case, for your first book, Shooters, there must be a lot of you in this. I'm not suggesting you're Stella, by the way, but
you won't be the first.
But there must be. We'll talk about Stella and who she is in a moment. But there must be, for many who work in the social photography arena, at least. This is a book that might be an eyebrow-raisingly familiar moment in terms of what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people have been describing it as Bridget Jones for photographers. And I think that's a pretty apt description.
So there are two main protagonists. We've got Stella, who I like. Now, I'm going to say at this point that we're going to have another conversation in a couple of weeks' time when I am going to do a proper book review, as it were, with you about your book on the Fujicast. But today we're talking on the Photowalk. So I thought it would be fun to split that up in two and have this in a sequel, as it were. But let's talk a little bit about Shooters, talk about the protagonists in the book. There's Stella and there's Connor. Tell me about Stella first.
Okay, so Stella is the newbie photographer who she comes to her first conference, which, in real life, it's called the SWPP. In my book, it's called the BAP conference. Right. And American listeners, in the UK, BAP is kind of a funny word for breasts as well. So it's a little bit of, tongue-in-cheek humor. So Stella Price starts off a newbie photographer. She has to change careers because she's made some bad life choices. She has limited funds to survive on, so she needs to start making some money fast, or else she's going to end up living with her parents back in Wales, which nobody would want to do.
Oh, come on.
But Wales is lovely, but
But she doesn't want to go back now.
She doesn't want to go back there, no. And her parents are, they're in the book as well, and you wouldn't want to wish that on her.
My good friend Kevin from Wales would say, "Oh, she sounds like she's from Merthyr."
Well, she's actually from Cardiff. Actually.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Right. But then, so she goes to this conference and she finds Connor Knight, who's this rock star photographer, and he's the one man who can teach her everything she needs to know quickly. And he's also the one man she should probably avoid, lest she repeat the mistakes of her past. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
I'm not sure whether you want me to say this, but already in my mind, I'd formed who Connor is. See, when you describe him, I was thinking SWPP. Conference, or BAP as we call it with its name here. And I think I know who this person is. I wonder whether many photographers have been saying to you, Julia, I know who these people are.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are going, I think I recognize some of these people. And I will neither deny nor confirm.
I wasn't expecting you to. Connor doesn't sound the nicest character at all. I don't like the sound of Connor. I don't want a spoiler, but am I going to dislike him halfway through the book as much as at the start?
No. I think he comes around in the end.
Does he?
Thankfully, it is a romance at the end of the day, and one of the hallmarks of a romance is the happy ending. You just have to you have to be invested enough that you want to get there and see how it all comes around.
How does it work when you're creating characters? Because I've often asked authors in the past, and I don't think I've ever had one way of authors doing it, but whether you start at the end and you work backwards, or you work forwards, or you have characters and then you find a story for, how does it work with, I mean, everybody's writing's different. Yours undoubtedly will be too.
Well, how did I approach this one? This one, I mean, I knew I wanted to start out with this new photographer, and I thought that, having that status shift between somebody who's brand new and somebody who's experienced would be a really fun way to frame the story of the book. But as far as how the character goes, they kind of, with every draft, you get more layers to them and you add more layers into the book. So they can start out a little bit one-dimensional. You figure out what their arc is going to be throughout the book, and then you write that, and then as you go through, you just kind of add in little bits that help to round them out into fully fledged people that you feel like you might know.
How many drafts did you have? Is there a number that's the acceptable literary number?
No, there's no, I mean, I'm not Jeremy Archer. He does like into the teens, I think. No, I think I did seven drafts. Yeah, somewhere around there.
And while you're doing that, are you relying upon people around you to read those drafts? I mean, is there a support structure within your writing world where you have somebody who's trustworthy enough to guide you? Not necessarily talking about an agent.
No. So my husband was the first reader.
Oh, okay.
Because strangely enough, he was a Jilly Cooper fan. He was very horsey when he was younger. So of course he saw that book on his mum's shelf and was like, "Oh, what's this about?" So he was my first reader. But then, just like in photography, it's really important to find your tribe with writing. And I was lucky. I did a Curtis Brown selective writing course over the pandemic, because Shooters is my pandemic baby. And they're the people that I trust. All the people that I met on the Curtis Brown courses are the people that I trust to read the book and give me good feedback and help me to shape it. So, because they'll notice things that you just completely didn't notice, and have ideas that you didn't have. So it's very important as a writer to have that.
Had you not done the creative writing course, do you think this book may not have happened?
Possibly. I mean, it wouldn't have happened in the way that it has happened, definitely, because there's been a lot of input from those people. But I think I owe a lot to that course.
Yeah. Stella suffers from panic attacks, doesn't she? And we talk a lot about panic, and we talk about imposter syndrome on this particular podcast. So this is rom-com plus, really, because there are more serious issues within. I know there's a lot of humour in there. I know this is racy. I'm not sure whether you'll be reading it to your son at bedtime just yet. But there are issues within the creative industry that I feel you've wanted to touch upon with this. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, in this particular book, it's a lot about the double standard between how women having relationships in the workplace are viewed versus men having relationships, and there is some theme of infidelity in this book. But she's made some bad choices, and she's the one that paid for them, whereas the man, had absolutely no comeback from it. So there's themes like that, and I think that a lot of people will identify with that or have seen that happen in their own lives. So
when you set out to write it, did you look at whether it was going to be comedy or whether it would be serious or whether it would be issue-led, or did you let that organically develop?
I mean, I don't think I can write serious. Yes, I do like to put humor in. I mean, no matter what I write, I think there will be some element of humor in there. So I was a copywriter before being a photographer, and I think that skill came in very handy, because sometimes there needs to be a killer line somewhere, and you want it to be funny, and you almost have to just write something down so that's the placeholder, and then you just think about it and you percolate it, and you have one of those shower eureka moments, like, oh yeah, I know what it should say, and you just hope that you have a notebook and pen nearby to write it down. But I think that having been a copywriter helped me really understand that process of working a line and making sure that it was funny, it was what it needed to be in the moment.
And Julia Bergier returns soon for part 2 of our conversation. I'm going to make another picture, another sketchbooker today, looking high into the air, doing that thing. If you're thinking, who's Steve Shipman at the start of the program? He was a a dear friend. Well, I didn't know Steve long enough, actually. And my regret is that we weren't able to spend more time together. But the time I did spend with him, what a generous, beautiful person he was in every sense of the word. His generosity in teaching and mentoring others. And with Phil Payne, his long friend Phil Payne, they both created this evening. It was in Hertfordshire, in England land, and they'd put talks on. I think it was only about a £5 or something. It was literally just to cover expenses of tea and coffee. No Garibaldis, I might add. It's my only criticism of the event. He used to bring in the most incredible speakers, did Steve. Well, both of them, Steve and Phil. And his career as an advertising photographer, commercial photographer, celebrity portrait photographer, and then a wedding photographer. That's who Steve is. And one of the things that he said in an interview, note to self, linked to this. One of the things he said in an interview, it was a film that I made with Steve actually, was Look Up. It was a mentor of his that said, look up. And we spoke about that following the interview. And I remember he said to me, are you looking up, Neil? Are you? Really? Are you looking up? So I always think of Steve and look up. And it's something I do actually in my wedding photography. I don't always remember to do it, and I did for a while put it on my crib sheet that has all the group shots that I've been requested to do that day, in amongst all the stuff I usually do. And I used to put it at the top, look up, make a sky picture. For some reason that's not on there. I must put that back on. Another note to self. I tell you what, this is a great memo, personal memo, doing this podcast. Let's make a picture looking up. Put your letters down for a second. I love this. Look at this. I'm looking straight up through, I think this is an oak, pretty sure, and it's got these beautiful, gnarly branches coming off it. I wouldn't want to... As I look up, I can see some of them have gone over the last few years, and the wind is getting up. But this is wonderful to shoot through. Behind it, there's I mentioned the blue skies earlier. Not quite sure whether I'm going to make these into black and white, so they might just look like contrasty segments of quite dark, moody skies. Right, here we go. 1/70th, f3.6, 160 ISO. Wind's getting up, as you can hear. Whoa! Looking up through the tree thinking, don't you dare drop a branch now. There would be irony, wouldn't it? You'd be the first one to find me listening to this. Right, yes, Julia will be back very, very soon for part 2. If you've been walking anywhere in the world, and I mean the world, that you can send us, a postcard from, in terms of a photograph you have made, I would dearly love to hear from you. And stories about where you shoot, what you can shoot. On the Extra Mile last week, we were talking about Saudi Arabia, weren't we, with my guest, Walid Al-Jaher, and he was talking about what you can and can't do. So, yeah, please, we had some pictures from China, didn't we, last week? Or one particular picture. Send them to stories@photowalk.show, 2,500 pixels wide if you can do the optimization. Otherwise, I will do that bit for you. I'm sure you know this by now, but I'm just going to gently remind you that there are now 2 photo walks a week. This one, the one you're listening to, and Wednesday's Extra Mile, which is available for our patrons who support this show. Without you, honestly, the show would not be what it is, probably wouldn't exist, because it is a project. It's a full-time project. I was just about to try and remember a very clever, pithy phrase then from Tom Stoddart, but it's not come to me. Edit that bit out, Neil. I can't. You've left me no opportunity to. All right, leave it in. Yes, there's 2 photo walks a week. We meet also once a month for the InVision show on Zoom with our guest speakers, and the roll of 12 and an invite to share. It's sort of like an adult show and tell. Adult show and tell, Neil. I'm not quite sure I like the sound of that. No, you know what I mean. where we get to share the pictures, the places we've been and seen. And that happens once a month in our Zoom chat.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Yes, this week on the show, Valerie Jardin on the Extra Mile, who is racking up the most mentions in one programme today. Anyway, Valerie attempts a few questions from our roll of 12.
She had waited 8 months for that camera, and now she wants to put the attachments. I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, they're great. I've tried them. They're amazingly good for just being something you screw in the front of your lens. They're amazingly good. But that defeats the purpose of that camera. It's all about limitations.
And my extra miler guest on episode 29 is, he's a former firefighter from the UK who went to Switzerland and never went home. Kieran Beard, who will shoot the breeze about his life and brand of street photography.
I think it's important for me to go out and take a breather and to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And that's my photography.
And, the episode being called Somebody Stole My Pictures, we raised the question about picture theft. Who does it? What do they get out of it? Why do they do it? And should we worry? As I say on that show, there's more questions than answers in terms of that particular subject, and we'll be tackling that more on the Extra Mile in the weeks to come. And you can become an Extra Miler by clicking on the Support the Show icon, which is on the front page of the website, photowalk.show. And thank you, sincerely, and I genuinely mean this, to all those who are making this show a weekly adventure with our cameras.
For quality used and inspected photo and video kit with a 6-month guarantee upon what you buy, visit mpb.com.
So back to our letters, and here's one from Ash M, who I think, Ash, you're in America land. I am right, aren't I? I haven't got your picture in front of me right at the moment. I made some notes, but I'm sure you are. And I like the title very much from your letter. It's called Photography as Catharsis. Told you would mention the C word, which is, very much talking to me, Ash, because that's exactly how I feel. I know we share that special privileged sense of the catharsism of photography. Anyway, your letter. Dear Neil, figured I'd start with an introduction. My name is Ash. I discovered your Fujicast some months back, and soon after ended up stumbling across the Photowalk. That's probably the way to do it. Stumbling through or along the path of a Friday with me. You are very welcome, and I'm pleased you did fall upon us. I take my camera everywhere I go, and I found that eventually I was listening to your back catalogue of episodes while on my own walks, and also while on my drives to pick up Mrs. M, and while marking my students' assignments. I'm not sure you should be doing that. And soon enough, I've been burning through all of them. Ash, there is a cure, I am sure. I've only recently subscribed to as a patron Extra Miler, and I deeply appreciate what you do. Now, Ash, you know me. I'm going to have to hide behind that beech tree just over there, just on the right over there, if you continue with this. Your thoughts and those of your guests and your audience are often so very thought-provoking, resonant and poignant, and they're packaged so beautifully too. Right, that's it. I'm going to have to hide behind the oak tree. Thank you, though. I feel I am flattered, sincerely flattered for by your kind words. It seems to have been the perfect time for me to get on the Patreon, because it meant that I was able to hear your thoughts on that momentous trip to Margate. I probably should fill in a few gaps here. I'll break from the letter for a moment, just so it makes sense to my other listener. Extra Mile 26 was called Finding Mum, and it was a story where I went to find my birth mum's grave. And I told the story of the story that I know, and a really surprising story that I didn't know when I got there. I went with a camera and a microphone, and actually, I suppose it was a photo and sound story that was a great catharsis to me. I was completely aware that it could sound self-indulgent, so it was a balancing act, doing a personal story and a photo story, but more than anything, it was a moment that I wanted to share. And that's what this thing is about, isn't it? Sharing. What was it John Campbell said about the hero story? That we almost have a sort of service to share our stories. A responsibility, probably, that's a better description of what he said. Not to keep them silent. To be the orator, the narrator. Anyway, just filling in some of the gaps there. As Ash says, on the subject of photography being his catharsis, I can't tell you how many times I decided to walk home after a particularly difficult day and as I walk, have my camera in hand, lifting it to my eye every so often. I started to elaborate on these ideas and to share the personal story that made it so clear to me that photography is part of my emotional process, but realised, as I did, that I'd written much of this before in a longer form article. And I'm going to link to it here because I read it last night. Oh, I was so taken by it, Ash. I really was. He says, I wrote it about 2 years ago, and it describes the truth of my photographic process as accurately as it did back then. Though now I find myself reaching more frequently for challenging gear, unconventional shooting conditions, things like that. But more on that another time. Perhaps if you ever find yourself inclined to talk about this at length. I do, and I've dropped you a message, which I hope you'll respond to. Anyway, says Ash, I suppose this is a roundabout way of saying that I hear truths about my own photographic process and my journey to and through it as I listen to both the Photowalk and the Extra Mile. So thank you. Wishing you all the best from Ash. Right. Oh, there's a PS before I do the right. That's like my, what would it be in musical parlance? That would be my key change, wouldn't it? My word right. PS, here's what I was shooting as I listened to the latest Extra Mile. Yes, thank you, Ash. And your story, well, the story that he's referencing just a moment ago is called Vultures. And, do go and read it because I will link to it on the show page. It is I believe it's one of the most powerful things I've read. It's such a beautiful piece of writing. It really is. And it comes at an entirely appropriate time in that Julia is my guest today. It's just wonderfully written. And if it sums up your photography, I'd say I felt that in every available measure. I truly did. It's a story called Vultures, as I say. It's 20 minutes read or so. And I'd like to read, if you don't mind, I'd like to read the first couple of paragraphs. Though I'm not going to do it now as I walk with the wind blowing behind me. I'm going to ask my studio self to do that for me now.
In 2011, a few short months after the passing of my beloved grandfather, our long-suffering CPU tower gave out. This in itself is fairly ordinary in occurrence. Electronics fail, but this was altogether more significant because on that hard drive of the machine were the last photographs we had of him. This was in the days where everyone had a point-and-shoot digital camera in the house, but relied instead on the 2-ish megapixel snappers on the back of their flip phones instead. The iPhone had been released a few years prior, but had yet to establish itself as the ubiquitous device we know today. In fact, the only person I knew who owned one was my grandfather himself. We'd backed up the photographs from my mother's Motorola. The phone had been lost to a spilt cup of tea, and when the CPU booted up and conked out for the last time, those images were lost too. Memories in the decades since have begun to fade, which leaves me thinking long and hard about what it means to take a photograph of someone you love, immortalizing them on some level, and ensuring that you always have something to hold fast to.
Now, you may be wondering why the title of Vultures, and I shall leave you to read the whole piece. I nearly said, Ash, would you mind, would you allow me the privilege that I could read the whole story as an audio short? but I also get the feeling that I'd like to hear this in your voice. I really would. Anyway, thank you for your thoughts and for your picture and for your story you wrote quite a while back. This letter is, and others like it, it's the reason why I make this program, and how I think it's wonderful that the program has developed, if you'll forgive the photographic pun for a moment, has developed into the style of program that it has, made by your letters and by your thoughts and by the pictures that you send in. So thank you so much for that today. Shall we have some inspiration? Yes, let's. This is the English author Neil Gaiman. Yes, Neil Gaiman. It's a piece I have played before. Seems a good time to play something from Neil, doesn't it? I'm going to do it again, though. I'm going to play this piece again. I'm going to treat it like a number one in the download charts that you should probably carry around in your consciousness forevermore, because there's some really important words, thoughts, and emotions that are shared here or expressed here. It's from a commencement speech, and it covers something I think is very relevant today, and that is picking up the creative ball, if you will, or in those listening to Neil at the time that it was actually made, that their first creative ball, and running with it. Plus also, as the discussion will soon turn to, self-publishing, believing in your work to such a degree that we're willing to put it out there ourselves. So this is Neil Gaiman talking about the changing face of the arts, and why actually it's a very, very exciting time. If you want to see the whole speech, I'll pop it on the show notes again for you today in the film reference library.
We're in a transitional world right now, if you're in any kind of artistic field, because the nature of distribution is changing. The models by which creators got their work out into the world and got to keep a roof over their heads and buy sandwiches while they did that, they're all changing. I've talked to people at the top of the food chain, in publishing, in book selling, in music, in all those areas, and no one knows what the landscape will look like 2 years from now, let alone a decade away. The distribution channels that people had built over the last century or so are in flux, for print, for visual artists, for musicians, for creative people of all kinds, which is on the one hand intimidating, and on the other immensely liberating. The rules, the assumptions, the now we're supposed to's of how you get your work seen and what you do then, they're breaking down. The gatekeepers are leaving their gates. You can be as creative as you need to be to get your work seen. YouTube and the web and whatever comes after YouTube and the web can give you more people watching than old television ever did. The old rules are crumbling and nobody knows what the new rules are. So make up your own rules. Someone asked me recently how to do something she thought was going to be difficult. In this case, recording an audiobook. And I suggested she pretend that she was someone who could do it. Not pretend to do it, but pretend she was someone who could. She put up a notice to this effect on the studio wall, and she said it helped. So be wise, because the world needs more wisdom. And if you cannot be wise, pretend to be someone who is wise and then just behave like they would.
Now, isn't that just the best advice? Comedically delivered, maybe, but this one certainly strikes me as a wonderful way of looking at life, doesn't it? It's something I do think we forget as we mature, I think. So you could say this one has hit me like an asteroid the size of a small mountain, a sharp reminder. The assignment has 1 more week to run, assignment time. And then there's a fresh one, which is going to be set by our friend, Valerie. This month's assignment was set by Tim Booth, he of the Show of Hands project that we waxed lyrical once more about last week. And it is simply to go make a picture that is of the light. And you'll find a little bit more about that. Was not a lot more, because that's essentially what it is on the assignment page, which you will find on the website photowalk.show. Just go to the features tab, and underneath there you'll see assignments. Visit us on March, and you'll see a bit more written about the assignment and the pictures that have been sent in so far. I said in the show that I have a challenge for you. Much earlier on I said, didn't I? And I do. And it's really off the back of this letter, a short letter from Richie Bradby, thank you, who spied this with his eagle eyes on the BBC website only a few days ago, or maybe it was a week. Not long, anyway. Hi, Neil. I know you like your vintage wall art and paintings, the signs that are now being lost as buildings are redeveloped, knocked down, or the signs simply start to fade with time. So, I thought you'd love this article I found about an artist who is taking pictures of old advertising paintings on the sides of buildings, and she's produced a fanzine for them. I am straight online and buying that fanzine. Yes, I did. I looked at the piece that you sent me a link for. Thank you so much. I love them, Richie. We have a few locally here. There's one just down the road from where I'm walking at the moment, I think, if I can possibly navigate my way back. I didn't know this, though. They're called ghost signs. Huge hand-painted vintage adverts on the sides of buildings. And to me, they're I've always thought this, they're every bit as valuable as a Banksy, though you might well argue not necessarily so clever, certainly not social messages or political statements, but they're real heritage pieces, and many of them are being lost. As the article says, let me just read a bit and I'll link to it and you can go and read the rest and see the pictures that are being made. The flaky remnants of adverts painted onto the walls of Bradford buildings years ago are being recorded by photographer Jenna Greenwood. Known as ghost signs, images of the faded advertising for cigarettes, medicines and even a cinema are being put together in a fanzine. I want to document them before they disappear, Jenna said. The landscape in Bradford is changing quite rapidly and we're losing quite a lot of our buildings and shop fronts. So to look into what we used to have. They say bold will hold, and there's a lot of truth in that. Many of them actually still look really, really good. So I've got a slight side challenge. Don't think of this as an assignment because there's not a set amount of time. Maybe this is one that can just run and run. But it's sort of, while it's fresh in the mind from Rich's letter, I'd like to introduce I suppose, let's call it, we used to have postcards, but they didn't really go anywhere, did they? I'm going to call it a postcard piece. He says, trying to drag, haul, clasp at the postcard idea, pull it back into vision again. But I do think this works wherever you are in the world. There are ghost signs all over the world, and I'd love to see it in your neighbourhood, wherever you are in the world. Now, last week we were travelling everywhere, as I say, China, Canada, Isle of Wight, and these ghost signs are a real international language of bygone advertising and messaging. So they exist in many, many places. There's some superb examples in America. I know that from pictures I've seen, I think of possibly of Mark Powers. Oh, did you hear that? It's getting closer. I think the storm is coming. So yeah, please, if you'd you might know now where one is. I'd love to see it. Let's start to build a bit of a collection. I might create a special page for them. We'll see how we go. We'll see if it takes off. That's probably the best way, isn't it? Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide, please. Whatever shape you shoot. Right, he says. Key change. Let's meet my guest, Julia Boggio, for part 2 of our conversation today. Shooters is the book, and we'll start part 2 with a facet of being creative, I think.
You've gone from what's often described as fairly lonely creative place as a wedding photographer, as a portrait photographer. Because I know that sounds strange, but in terms of weddings, it's very hard to describe to people, but it's true that you go to these amazing events with 100, 200, 300 people, all drinking champagne and laughing and having a fantastic time, and you're there in your own thoughts. It's quite an out-of-body experience.
It is, and you hide behind the camera as well.
Yeah. What about being an author? Because you've thrust yourself into another world of what authors do describe as quite a lonely place.
Well, to be honest, I think I'm an introvert extrovert. So I do love being around other people, but I also very much love being by myself. So I think that it works for me and who I am. So yeah, I enjoy it. I know the Postman very well. I mean, not like that well, but
hang on.
But,
Note to self: we've got a fourth book coming up. We haven't even got to the end of 3 yet. A tale from many moons ago, which I promise will lead to a question. In my days presenting a radio program about arts, part of my remit was to talk to authors, and my researcher had a very, very firm line when it came to which authors would be allowed into the studio and have airtime. Now, back then, it wasn't really a self-published versus traditional method argument. But this does seem to be a wall that you've run into, and I only know this from having watched your, you used the word authentic, very authentic moments in TikTok. I was looking through your TikTok, and I saw you address the elephant in the room, as you called it. The fact that in terms of publicity, it's been very hard to appeal to some people that self-publishing should not be sniffed at, because this is a self-publishing project, isn't it?
it is, yeah. So, I mean, I did get an agent after I did the course, and she was wonderful. And actually, she's still my agent for film and TV. Mm-hmm. She sent it out to all the publishers, and we had excellent feedback. Like, people were like, "Yeah, we really love this." I even had one publisher come back and say, "Oh, this is too high concept for us," which is great. It means that. But nobody took it, and the reasons I had back, number one was we already have a wedding themed rom-com on our lists. So I guess that means that there can only be one, like The Highlander, which was interesting, because not many wedding rom-coms are written by somebody who actually worked in the wedding industry.
No. Right.
And I think that one of the, I've read some of my reviews, which I know I shouldn't do, but that's something that people are commenting on, is that they really feel like they're learning something, but I'm not hitting them over the head with it, which it's a tightrope to walk. And the other thing that I was told, and this was off the record, told to my agent, was that in the rom-com space, they were looking for younger writers who had a better chance of going viral on TikTok.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I think that was kind of the last straw for me. I was like, you know what? I can do this. It's a good book, and self-publishing, all the tools are there. And if I had continued to go through the traditional route, it would have been another 2 years. I would have been 50 years old before this book ever saw the light of day. And so I decided to self-publish it. It's been great. I mean, God, I feel like I've done a master's degree in publishing in the past 6 months, but it's also been very rewarding. And, you know me from my days as a photographer, I do love the marketing side.
Yeah.
And I love that challenge. So yeah, it's challenged me in that way as well.
Does this mean you're surrounded by boxes and boxes of shooters, the book?
Well, I am, but not for the reasons you think. So I did buy quite a few copies in before I was doing the conference, because I expected more footfall. But the thing is, we had all those strikes on last week, so there was fewer people than expected. But I still did really well.
No, I wasn't suggesting for a moment, by the way, that it hadn't sold enough. I know what you're saying. But you don't have to do that anymore. So, like, as a self-published author, you don't have to buy in stock. Right.
You can use a company called Ingram Sparks, and they'll do, print on demand, and also Amazon it does print on demand. So you don't have to have boxes and boxes of books sitting around.
And how does that work internationally, Julia? Because this is a book that will have just as many and much interest abroad as it would. I say abroad. The thing about podcasting is we're all abroad at some stage, but it's going to have a wide interest across many borders, isn't it?
Yeah. So, it's available, I guess, in all English-speaking countries. I'm not sure about the non-English-speaking ones. I'm going to I'm going to wait a little bit, and I'll do translations at some point. Definitely German, Italian, and Spanish and French. Well, is that the main ones there? Yeah. But yeah, so it's down the line because it's obviously expensive to start doing all that kind of stuff, and audiobooks as well. That's another very large growing market.
Well, I did have that on my. I'm tapping it here because that question is there. What about the audiobook, and who will be the reader?
I don't know. Yeah, because it's funny because I've been asked to read out from my book on a couple podcasts.
Yeah.
And I've read out from it, and I don't have the right voice from it because it's a British rom-com. I know you're listening to my voice going, she's American, but I've lived here for over 20 years. It's very much a British rom-com, and in my head, all the characters are British, Welsh, all kinds of different things. And I just don't do it justice in my own voice. So I know a lot of authors do their own audio reading, but I will not be doing that.
Now, I've probably done this the wrong way round, actually, because we've talked about self-publishing, but you went through the submission process with an agent. How does that make you feel? I've talked to authors before about the submission process, and I can only liken it in my own life to sending hundreds of demo tapes into radio stations and getting. I've still got them, Julie. To be honest, I've got all the no letters I ever received. I have kept, and it seems to me that the submission process is one of the same, because you think, the next one's going to drop. Tomorrow, Del Boy will be millionaires. But it's not like that, is it?
No, it's a tough process. I mean, I was really lucky. I think I only sent out to about 11 or so. Okay. Don't quote me on that, and I had offers from 2. So I was one of the lucky ones. But, my friend Jane, she's sent out to maybe 60, 70, and she's had loads of no's. And it's confusing because her book is really, really good. Yeah. So it all really depends on what they're looking for at the moment. It's like casting a TV show or a movie. You have something in your mind. People walk in, they may be perfectly good actors, but it's just not what you're looking for at the time. So it's the same sort of process.
Does that mean then, I'm sensing that you'll probably stay within the self-published arena, or might that change as your career moves forward?
I mean, I'm open to anything, really. I think that the future of publishing will very much be that you have choices. You could do some self-published, you could do some traditionally published. There's no reason that you can't sort of flick back and forth between the two.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Colleen Hoover, I know she's got some, deals with traditional publishers now, but she's also self-publishing as well. She's continuing to self-publish. So, I think that that's the great thing about it, is that we can create the career that we want to create now. It's not so down one or the other.
Yeah, I suppose in many ways YouTube has proved that to us, hasn't it? That no longer do you need a film distributor or an agent or a studio or tech ops and tech crew. Yeah. You are your own distributor. You are your own crew.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's how Cobra Kai started. It started as a YouTube show, didn't it? And then it got picked up by Netflix. Yeah. So actually we interviewed the writer of The Karate Kid on my podcast, a little bit as an aside.
Well, no, I'm glad you mentioned your podcast, because you segued. It's almost like you planned it. You segued beautifully into Two Lit Chicks. It's no longer Two Lit Chicks. It's now One Chick, One Bloke.
Yeah, but we live in an age where it doesn't really matter.
Well, when I saw the title, I thought, it's quite cool. I quite like that, and I didn't realise the history of the show, that you started one way. But tell me about the podcast. You're a very keen podcaster, as I like to think of myself as a keen podcaster. It's a really exciting medium, I think.
Yeah, you know what? I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I do. Because we started it last June, and when I originally started, it was I was in that submission process, and I was waiting to hear back from publishers, and I didn't want to wait. I wanted to start building my author brand. Yeah. And so it felt like a good way to do that, and a relatively cheap way as well. I mean, I actually have a talent of making anything expensive, so I did bring a producer on board. So we do have that. But it's been surprisingly fun, and I I've met loads of amazing authors through it as well. Some who blurbed my book as well, which is important to get, established authors to read it and then give you that little quote for the front cover.
Absolutely.
It's been a good journey. I'm really enjoying it. It's good.
Many authors say they become fiercely protective of their characters. I wonder whether I don't know. Have you found that at all? A
little bit, yeah. Because as I said earlier, I've been reading reviews that I probably shouldn't review. And I read, and I've been very happy. I mean, the majority of the reviews are fantastic and 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah.
But it's natural. You are going to get a range of reviews, and to me, I mean, that's a rite of passage in a way to get a 1-star review.
How do you handle that?
Well, you know what? A lot of the times when you read those reviews, it's just like, just wasn't my reader. And that's something I learned from being a photographer. You had that client who just didn't understand your work or thought the prices were too high or whatnot. You just say, just not my client.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. You can't be all things to all people. No. So I accept that. And, you get some people who say, oh, I like Stella. Some people say, I hate Connor, or, or I don't like Stella or whatnot. And, so you get a range, and it's interesting, actually, I find it, to see other people's points of view, because of course you're coming at it from one point of view, but when you birth it into the world, when you put it out there, then it's very much, it's no longer yours, really.
I'm always intrigued by when people write, when authors write. What's the time of day that works for you?
Well, what I would like to write and when I actually write are two completely different things.
Okay.
So my time when I feel the most creative would be from like 9 to 1 o'clock in the morning. But because I've got all the marketing now to do for shooters, a lot of that happens during the time that I would have been writing. So I actually need to wake up at 5 in the morning to write. So I wake up at 5. I set myself a goal of doing 500 words. You can slowly pick away at that word count and I'll get there eventually. But I mean, I've already got 70,000 words of the second book, so not too much further to go.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a target of 500 words a day.
Yeah, but I need to get back into my flow. The problem is when I was about 60,000 words into the book when I started the podcast in June. And then that kind of stopped it dead because there was so much work that needed to go into it.
Well, I'm thoroughly looking forward to there being a second part to our conversation. I'm a terrible spoiler. So I will promise you, I will do my utmost best to get into the characters and behind the characters and talk about the characters without giving away the storyline. That's important. But I wonder, Julia, just finally, what you've learned about yourself in this process of being an author, your new life, your phoenix, your new life.
My new life. What have I learned about myself? This is actually quite a big question. But I've learned that I'm definitely the kind of person who sets a goal and goes for it. I mean, I've always been that way, but I think that I've done it enough times now, with, like being a copywriter, like that was a hard job to do. And I got in there and did that for a while. And then, starting a photography business and climbing to where I did. And then, and then saying, okay, now I'm going to be an author. So I definitely am goal oriented and and I'm good at reaching those goals. And even and I think it's also shown me how sorry to float my own boat, but how good I am at marketing. Because I don't know if you saw the campaign that I put together.
I did.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to save it for the second half?
No, let's talk about it now.
Okay.
Since you mentioned it.
Yeah. So, basically I sat down and I thought, what resources do I have to do this? And I thought, I've got a fat black book full of names and zero budget. So I reached out to my contacts and I asked them to photograph themselves reading the book. Yeah. And my contacts include people like Jerry Guionis and Kelly Brown and Sarah Edwards and all these people who are amazing photographers. Yeah. And I didn't know when I reached out to them, I didn't know if they were going to do exactly what it was that I wanted them to do, but 100%, 110% they did. You know, they started sending me back these pictures of them reading my book, and it just blew my mind. And I knew that this marketing campaign was going to work. It was going to make a splash. And the whole idea was to get everybody to put all their images up at the same time on my launch day and just try to get me as far up the bestseller list as I could go. And people, I think, woke up and were like, whoa, their whole entire feeds on all platforms were just flooded with these images of photographers reading shooters.
And there was an interesting pricing strategy for the very first few days of it as well, wasn't there? Oh,
yeah. Drop the price right down to 99p so that there's absolutely no barrier in the way to them buying it. And I got pretty far. So in the UK, I got to number 16 in romantic comedy on the Amazon Kindle list. Yep. And that is a competitive market. Yeah. So I'm actually really, really proud of that. And then in the United States, I got to number 1 bestseller status, which gives me the right to use that lovely little sticker from Amazon that says number 1 bestseller. And it was in the satire section, which is like, that's fine with me, I'll take it, because it is a satire. Yeah. And in Canada I also did get to number 1, but that was like pop culture and fashion, which is a little bit of a stretch, but let's go with it.
But keeping that up is going to be the next challenge, isn't it? Because the book is new. It's new, so you have to keep this rolling.
Well, I mean, there's it's hard work now. I mean, now's when the slog begins, and I've got to become an expert in Facebook ads. Like, I wish I was in some sci-fi novel where you could just like put a disc in your hand or something, and then you download like how to be a karate expert. So I wish I could do that, but no, I'm going to have to do it the hard way. And Facebook ads, Amazon ads, all these sort of things. That's very much the maintenance and just networking.
Well, Shooters is out. You're writing the second and third in the trilogy. It's fascinating to hear how reinvention has worked for you as a photographer, and we are due to talk again. I'm looking forward to that, but I have a problem now because I've done my and finally, and we ended up learning a little more about marketing. So I'm gonna have to bring it round full circle to the Dirty Dancing intro and just ask. Are you having the time of your life?
Yes, I am. And they're going to play that song at my funeral. I've already accepted that. But anyway.
And my thanks to Julia Boggio for her time with us this week on the podcast. If you're thinking, time of my life, what's that got to do with you probably need to go and watch the video. I'm sure you grabbed the concept from the first part of our conversation. I'm probably just talking to my other listener who doesn't always get this stuff straight away. But my thanks, Julia. It was a privilege talking to you. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again because, let me tell you a short story, which I think I may have furnished you with before. But just in case you weren't there that day, years ago, I was presenting an arts show. It's one of the shows I presented on the BBC on Auntie, and I loved doing it. Actually, it was such a fun show. It's probably one of the most fun shows I think I presented. It was a radio program, and actually, it's the very same program and he might be one of the first guests of this podcast actually, where I met a photographer called Phil Minot. And he wanted to come and do a photography feature on the radio every, Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. And at the time, my researcher, or maybe me, or maybe both of us said, what, photography on the radio? How's that ever possibly going to work? What a stupid idea. And look, here we are, decades later. But that was the same arts show. And anyway, part of that arts show remit was that I would interview authors and do book reviews / interviews on the back of reading a book. Now, we used to get press releases which would give us a sort of a feeling, a soupçon, excerpts from the book that would help us to put our interviews together, research our questions. But it wasn't always, they weren't always great, and actually they weren't very well detailed. And you really should read the books, and I was pretty diligent in doing so, except, well, I'm sure it didn't happen just the once, but the one time that I remember that entirely changed my approach from that moment on was an author who came in to talk about his book. And I started asking questions, and not long into the interview, less than 5 minutes, he essentially said, "It's very clear to me you've not read my book. I shall not be continuing this conversation." The red light was still on, the microphone was live, he got up, collected his satchel, walked out the room, door closed behind him. That was it. I was left in complete silence thinking, oh, this is not quite what I was expecting to do with this live show this afternoon. And it was a lesson to me to always be honest about reading books if you're speaking to somebody who has written a book. I mean, it's a courtesy, isn't it, extended to an author who has taken time, put their heart and soul into writing a book. So today's conversation with Julia, even though I know a bit about the characters, it wasn't a book review as such. It wasn't a more in-depth discussion about the book, and more. There's more actually to talk about in the writing process as well. So I wanted to make it a sort of a two-parter shared between the two podcasts that I present, because I think it has a lot of interest for those that listen to the Fujicast. Many of whom will probably be wedding photographers. Although it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's a book about weddings. It doesn't mean you have to be a wedding photographer to appreciate it, obviously. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going back. I've got the book. I'm buying the book, rather. It's coming. Might even be on my doorstep when I get home. And I'm going to read it. And the second part, or the third part, I suppose, if we're counting the two parts that we had today, will be a conversation on the Fujicast in the weeks to come. Where I can dig into the book a bit more, dig into or unpick the publishing world a bit more, because I'm sure from reading the book will come questions that will be more general about writing and publishing. So there's another part to come. For links to Julia and other photographers you've heard about or from today, socials and the websites that we've mentioned, go to today's show page, which is 374 on photowalk.show, or as I say, click on the link just there, that one there. Now's the time to, well, no, actually now's not, because there's more to come. We've got the play-out song, some more thoughts in a minute, which I know you're going to appreciate from a certain Neil Gaiman. So no, do it in a while. Yes, and then you can follow. Well, there's films and links and all sorts of stuff, all manner of stuff on there. Now, our play-out song today. And if you're not familiar with this, because you're a new other listener who's just joined us, then we have a play-out song at the end of every single podcast, which I know is very unusual for a photography show, probably unique. And I choose. Often a lot of the songs are quite. They're quite slow, quite everything can be melodic, but they sort of they suit the pace of the walk. They suit the pace of walking, gently walking, making some last photographs as we wend our way out of the podcast. That's what the play-out song is designed to do. When I was listening for today's, or when I was searching for today's, I thought, you know what I need? I need a sassy number. I need something that goes with Shooters, the book. I need something just a bit on the edge, as it were. So that's our play-out song. Perhaps I was imagining Stella and Connor with this song being an advert, because this could be the advert for Stella and Connor's stories, whilst also wanting something that was gentle and could accompany us on our walk. It's from an artist I like very much called Stephen Bedell. The song is called I Need You, and you'll hear that in a moment's time. As for a postscript, what should we have as a PS today to end the show? I think a paragraph or two more from Neil Gaiman. The very last few moments of the clip I played earlier, which I wanted to leave to the end. I think it suits the feeling of the end of today's show, because I think this says everything about having belief. It says everything about believing in yourself. And though the great British author might be saying this to hopeful new eyes of the future when he delivered this commencement speech, I think it holds strong for all of us, of whatever age, in whatever we do, and whatever we desire to do, whatever we hope to do, but haven't done yet.
And now go and make interesting mistakes, make amazing mistakes, make glorious and fantastic mistakes, break rules, leave the world more interesting for your being here. Make good art.
I've got 9 lives. Somehow your words tear me apart. Quiet whispers, I hear you crying. Love that pain in my heart. I need this fantasy, so I can recognize what's under my skin. I need this selfish dream, so I can understand this game we've been playing. I need you, baby. It's a faithless road I'm on. I need you, baby. 'Cause it's been darkness all along. I need you, baby. I need this fantasy, so I can recognize what's hidden from me. I need this selfish dream, so I can understand this heart that's been bleeding. I need you, baby. It's a faithless road I'm on. I need you, baby. 'Cause it's been darkness all along. I need you, baby. It's a faithless road I'm on. I need you, baby. 'Cause it's been darkness all along. I need you, baby.
Stephen Beddoes, I Need You. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Julia Boggio once again. The Extra Mile is out. And a reminder that this week, Valerie Jardin answers questions from the Roll of 12. We talk street with Kieran Beard. And there's that question. What do we do about image theft? Next week on the Photowalk, Los Angeles-based Josh Rose talks about dance photography, films, the Beatles, and meditation. Blimey, Neil, that sounds eclectic. I promise you, it is. Final virtual fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of stuff that only works after he's given it a reboot. Emily Renier for your Eyes in Our Facebook group. And Andrea Gilpin, Chief of Staff on the Instagram and Ideas floor. Also to Art's List for the music today, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.